The scripture today are from Luke 4:16 through 21. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today the scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
I first want to thank those of you who in this congregation have at some point in your life gone to Rise. On our way in today, Rudy and Marge Savoy shared that back in the 80s, they have immensely fond memories of being part of the support teams that would bring supplies to the local work sites for the youth from this church who were working on Rise. And Rudy said, over the years, I accumulated so many Rise t-shirts, but I gave them away, and I would really love one. So Dave and Becky Meyer, Dave, who's the chair of the Rise board, they're going to make sure that we get you too some t-shirts. There's a spirituality of pilgrimage that holds us an understanding that whatever pilgrimage site we're going to, this for the last 2,000 years, and even before that in the Jewish tradition, there was a holy site that people would journey to. And people initially thought that the site itself was the holiness and the place where we would experience God. But what we discovered over the journey, the pilgrimage, was that it was the people and situations along the way where God made God's self known to us. And so whatever happens on a pilgrimage is somehow holy. Everything that happens on a pilgrimage belongs. Everyone we meet, every situation that we encounter, even if it's not a situation of our own choosing, is all part of God's way of blessing us, or teaching us to trust, or teaching us how to really see. And when we can see everything as a pilgrimage, and every trip we make and every day we live as a pilgrimage of trust, it allows us to say, I am right where I need to be, even if things aren't going well. Would you repeat after me? I am right where I need to be.
I am right where I need to be.
You may be in a season of your lives where you're not really having a good time. But would you repeat after me? I am right where I need to be.
I am right where I need to be.
So last Sunday morning, let me just say, by the way, as I looked at our team and smiled, what a pleasure to spend a week with these four people. You may not know their names, but this is Mia, Sammy, Esther, and Josh. And to your parents, thank you for raising such great kids. These are phenomenal human beings, and it was a joy to spend time with them this week. As we gathered last Sunday at 7:30 a.m., it seems like it was months ago, we got in the car, we got in my minivan. Some of you have seen that red minivan driving around town. And we were about 2 hours into our journey on a highway in Pennsylvania when we went into a pothole that was the mother of all potholes. It was big and deep and wide. Isn't there a song, Deep and Wide? And the whole minivan jolted. And from then on, we heard something that sounded like metal on metal. And so we pulled off the next exit. And we thought, let's just look for a garage. Now it's Sunday morning. So chances are that a garage would be open is pretty slim. We looked around this little town of New Milford, Pennsylvania. There was no garage open. Sammy spotted a sign that looked vaguely familiar. It was United Methodist Church with the cross and flame. We thought, they'll be open. And they might know someone who's a car mechanic. So it was raining. We had been out inspecting the tire. The tire was still inflated. This was the front right tire. And so we kind of come into the narthex of this little church, bedraggled, wet, clearly looking like we don't belong there. And a few of the ushers greeted us and gave us bulletins. We said, we're really sorry. We can't stay for worship. We're on a mission trip from the United Methodist Church in Chatham, New Jersey. We're looking for someone who might know a car mechanic. And so then the pastor came over and she said, well, I can't help you with the car, but whenever you do leave, please wait until I say a prayer of blessing for you, which she did. We gathered right there in the narthex and she held our hands and said a prayer of blessing for us. She said, go talk to those guys over in the corner of the narthex. And there were these 3 old guys who looked like they sit in that very spot in the narthex every Sunday. He heard our story, one of them, and he simply said, what sound is it making? We told them, and they all took their guesses on what it was. One of them came out into the rain and got down on his knees and kind of pulled the tire back and forth. And he said, well, it's structurally sound, but you might want to go check this out. Go to the Mavis dealership in Binghamton, New York. If you can get up to Binghamton, which was about 20 miles away, go to the Mavis dealership and they'll be able to help you. We thanked them. We got in the car. We drove slowly with the hazard lights on through the rain to the Mavis dealership. We pulled into a gas station thinking, I've got duct tape in the back. Maybe we can open the hood and just see what's making the noise. And we duct taped something. Didn't solve the noise problem. We got to the Mavis dealership and they were open. I've never been so thankful for someone who is not observing the Sabbath. They said, yeah, we'll take a look at it. They put it up on a lift. 3 guys looking around underneath, nothing. They couldn't see anything. They brought it down again. They popped the hood. And one guy said, oh, we have a problem here. Apparently, the strut, which is on the left and the right side strut had busted through the casing, and he said, we're going to have to replace both of your struts. That's a big job. And I don't know if our supply companies have even open today. Long story shorter, he called the supply guy, they were open, and he said it'll probably take about 4 hours, but we'll get you back on the road tonight so you can get to Friendship, New York. So as I'm talking with these guys, Sammy and the group were going to find a diner about 20-minute walk away. And at the same time, we weren't sure if the car was going to be ready. So I called the local United Methodist Church in Binghamton, which was just down the street. I said, might you have a church van that we could borrow this week if I have to leave my car in the shop? And I told them the whole story. And the person on the other end of the line said, our youth group just went to Appalachia Service Project yesterday with our church van, so I'm sorry we don't have a van for you. But she said, my son is having a graduation party in our fellowship hall all afternoon. If you'd like to come, why don't you come? So went down, we had lunch. We thought, what could we get for this young man named Brian, who was having a celebration with his friends from the Special Olympics. And so we went to some gift store named Tom's, and we bought some things. I think you bought some things. Johnny, you can act surprised when you get for Christmas little gifts that we got at Tom's. And so we then walked to the United Methodist Church in Binghamton and walked in the back door. We could see there were some people down in the fellowship hall, and we walk in looking equally out of place. The eyes kind of turn and look at us like, who are they? Do you know them? And we said, Brian's mom invited us to the party. So we gave Brian a nicely wrapped box of chocolate-covered potato chips. We thought, what high school kid wouldn't like that? And he came over and he said, thank you. He said, I don't know what to say. And we just said, happy graduation, Brian. Thanks for the invite to your party. We took a selfie with Brian and his friends from the Special Olympics. I think you'll see that picture. Is that up there, Sammy? And long story short, we picked up the car and drove the rest of the 2.5 hours to Friendship, New York. We were late to the first meetings. We were late to dinner, late to the first worship service. But it became kind of a story that we all appreciated, because everything at Rise that happens is not expected. And we were all kind of learning to roll with it and to be able to say, whatever's happening on our work site, I'm right where I need to be. Whatever's happening at home or at our workplaces, I had a number of adults say they got urgent calls from their work. They were able to say, I'm right where I need to be, and to be present. So I share that with you for someone who may need to be able to say, I'm right where I need to be. You'll hear some of the stories here, but follow up afterwards with more questions if you want to know more. But we all have a little piece of something that was meaningful to us that we'll share today. And as I shared earlier, you might be thinking, maybe someday I'll go on Rise as an adult advisor. Or maybe my kids will someday go on Rise. Or maybe I'll go on Rise as a youth. Think about how seeds might be sown today in your lives or in your kids' lives or in your grandkids' lives, because this is a very special ministry that God has opened to the Chatham United Methodist Church, and we are so thankful for your support. Mia, you want to tell a story? Yeah, here.
So the person whose house we worked on, name was Lillian, and Lillian has a lot of history in her town. She has a lot of family there, and she means a lot to a lot of people in her town. And so when we were there, it was the 10-year anniversary from when her husband Jim had died, and every day we would sit on Lillian's porch with her that Jim had built, and she would tell us a lot of stories, and a lot of them were about Jim. And there was one story that really stuck with us. And so right after Jim had died, Lillian's daughter was having a really hard time, and she was grieving. And one night she had a dream that Jim was telling them not to throw away his shoes. And she told Lillian that, and Lillian was really confused. She didn't know what it could mean. And she thought about it, and she remembered that she would always tell Jim that nobody could fill his shoes. And we thought that was a really special story, and that it was really meaningful, and it could have been like a sign from God telling them that Jim was always with them and always looking over them.
Good job.
Lillian was very, very special. She hosted us on her porch, and I think we all agree that her porch was kind of her holy ground. She would hold court. Anybody who would come by would come and visit on that porch, which we appreciated on those hot, sunny days. And part of her porch, too, one of the projects we were working on was replacing the railings up to her porch. They were kind of very rickety and not very safe. If you were going to put your weight on it, you weren't sure if it would hold you. So you'll see some photos of us rebuilding those railings. But along the ceiling of the porch, she had multiple hummingbird feeders full of what looks like red Kool-Aid, but it's just hummingbird food, which is probably pretty close to Kool-Aid, some sugary juice. And you could hear these hummingbirds come by all the time, and they sounded like huge bees. I don't know if you ever heard a hummingbird buzz, their wings. And they would visit all the time, and she told us, they weren't there on the first day of May this year, and they're always there on the first day of May. And they were late this year, so she didn't put out her hummingbird feeders. And then eventually she noticed them coming up to one of her windows multiple times a day, almost knocking, saying, "Hey, lady, we know we're supposed to get food here. Where is it?" So she put out her feeders, and she refills them every couple of days, and we got to help her with that as well. But that's part of who visits her sacred space. Her porch includes all kinds of critters who visit her, and we got to flood around her house like hummingbirds this week, and it was quite an honor to be a part of her porch stories.
So something that connects to both the birds and like everything with Jim is that so actually also her son had passed away a little while ago, and during tool training we built a birdhouse. So we thought that it would be a good idea to inscribe in loving memory of Jim and her son David. And we wrote like on the side like where we were from and signed all our names. And another fun thing that we do on Rise is that at the end of the week, all of the teams choose like a physical symbol for like an offering for like something to describe the week. And so we chose these two plants. So this one here is like about 100 years old, and we cut it off from a plant that's been passed on through Lillian's whole family for a really long time. And this one was given to her by her husband, Jim. And so we chose them because they're really old and they've been passed on for a long time, growing along. So it's like a metaphor because the porch was built by Jim and we're helping pass it along by fixing the railings. So that was just something that was really special and really nice to help her out with.
One thing that I enjoyed on the Rise trip was, so we went to like a cookout on one of the days we were there, and yeah, it was just really fun. There was a lot of food, good food, and I remember we threw the frisbee around, and that was something I really enjoyed, as well as there was a volleyball game, and it might not have been the best skill-wise, but I don't know, I still enjoyed it. And yeah, I think that's just something I'll never forget. Yeah.
All right, good, thanks. Do you want to introduce the idea of new
Sure.
things?
So we were, on Thursday night at Rise, it's tradition that all of the different work teams from many, many churches around the area, I think this year we had 7 or 8 teams, and we were one of them. We have a delightful family who, mostly Becky, who cooks for us delicious food, breakfast and dinner for almost 70 plus people, multiple times a week. An incredible woman, delicious food. We give her a night off every Thursday. So we could go out to experience different food in restaurants in the area and kind of support them. And we realized during dinner all the different brand new things we had done in just that day. And it gave us the idea to share with you some of the things we had never done before throughout the whole trip. So we're going to pass the mic around and hear some things that none of us had ever done before. For me, I'll start. I had never showered in a locker room before. I was lucky enough to get out of gym in high school, and so that was a first for me.
So we actually finished our job early and we went to another site, and their job was to paint a house. So something new that I did is I got on a cherry picker, which is this little machine, and it brought us up to like the roof of the house, and it was really high up and it was fun.
I work with tar and turpentine for the first time, and I think it might also be the last time. It was very messy.
It was my first time using a power sander to sand a railing.
Yeah, that was the first time I had put spindles on a rail, and we cut some of the spindles. Dave and Becky helped us with that project, and using a power sander, that was new for me too.
Another part of Rise is that each day one member of the team will make lunches for everybody. So we take our sandwich orders, and that was my first time making 5 sandwiches at once. I'm an only child. I wasn't used to so many sandwiches at one time. It was an experience.
Something else that was new is that we also learned a lot about different things, like a bunch of roof stuff and trying to fix leaks and a bunch of stuff with woodworking and a bunch of new saws that especially Josh used, and yeah.
It was my first time trying exotic foods like dill pickle chips and poutine.
That was my first time sleeping on an air mattress in a school gymnasium. That was also quite an experience.
So just to follow up on the lunch thing, we would get bags every morning, lunch bags, and you'd write down what you wanted in your lunch and give it to whoever was making the lunch, and we would each take turns making the lunch. I have made these lunches for 10 years, on and off with Rise groups. For the first time, Josh wrote something on the bag that I had never seen before. And it was so inspiring to me. He just wrote his name at the top, Josh Tavati. Surprise me. And I thought, my gosh, that is such trust. I want to be like Josh when I grow up.
Could have been ham and peanut butter for all we know. We don't know what would have been the surprise. Any other new things that we came up with? Yeah.
So for the dinner that we went on for Thursday night, it was on a maple farm, and they made a bunch of maple syrup. And so for the first time, I saw how maple syrup was made, and we saw a lot of trees, maple trees.
Yeah, that was an incredible place. We'll tell you more about it later. We also have, I'll just do a brief plug now and remind you during announcements. We have local honey and local maple syrup from Friendship, New York for sale. If you came in this way, you might have seen it on a small table. It's part of our Rise fundraiser, but you can get a small sweet taste of Rise. So good. Yeah, it was a lot of new experiences, Josh. I think it was also new to wake up at 6:30 every day, usually with a delightful Dave Meyer hollering, playing music, ringing cowbells some mornings, whatever it took to get 70 high schoolers out of bed at 6:30 in the morning. That was a new one as well.
Is there any other new things you want to share? I just want to thank Sammy Main for pulling this off. She was hired about a month ago and hit the ground running and communicated and planned and invited and organized so that we could go on this Rise trip. And I'm so grateful for her leadership and her spirit and her presence. And we are blessed to have Sammy Main on our staff. And we're planning for many years to come to be going to Rise with Sammy's leadership. So thank you, Sammy. Sammy put a slideshow together, and we hope you enjoyed just some of the glimpses of Rise 2023. I also want to thank Dave Meyer and the Rise Board for all of the work they do every month of the year to make this Rise ministry happen for so many churches and so many youth groups. Thank you, Dave.